When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Please be seated. I was just stepping out of this small stone chapel high up in the southern Caucasus Mountain on the peak of Lomita, Lion Mountain. It was this little stone chapel that had been built centuries before. And as I stepped out of the darkness of the space, I came to find myself surrounded by these 3 cow herds and a park ranger. My first thought was, oh no, what have I done? I was in the Republic of Georgia on my first backpacking trip, my first adventure out of the village and away from the host family that I was staying with, still navigating a language that I didn't speak, a culture that I was still coming to know. And I was ready to be scolded by these men for some indiscretion that I had no idea that I had committed. But instead, they gestured towards me, tried to speak in Georgian. I didn't understand. I tried my broken Russian. They didn't quite understand. But I understood the gesture that they gave. Come with us. Come with us. I thought, well, it doesn't seem like I have much choice. So they led me along the path in this meadow at the peak of the mountain that I had come down and led me back to this little hut. The structure with corrugated metal siding and a roof that sloped badly in one direction. And they invited me to come with them. Just outside of the hut, there was a rough-hewn wooden table with benches alongside it. Dojeki, sit. Sit down. And so I sat. And then the youngest of the cowherds, the son of the older man who was with them, went into the hut and started pulling out plates of food. Fresh farmer's cheese from the cows that they lead up into the mountains. Rough-cut tomatoes and cucumbers clearly from the gardens down in the village below. They dusted off plates and forks and little glasses that they proceeded to fill with homemade wine to offer a toast to one another. And then came the bread. 2 huge loaves of irregularly shaped bread, clearly home-baked. A couple days stale from having been up in the mountains with them while they tended the village's cattle, but still smelling of yeast, still with a dusting of flour on the surface. We sat down together. One of the men took that loaf of bread, tore a chunk of it off for himself, and passed it along to me. Invited me to take some myself, and I did. And we passed it around the table, each taking a chunk of that bread. They offered a toast, and we sat and we ate. I was completely unprepared for this backpacking trip. Again, foreign country, some of the gear that I needed, had a sleeping bag and a tarp in my backpack to sleep under, and a few crushed granola bars that had survived the couple months that I had been in the country. A little bit of food that I had managed to scrounge together at a convenience store near the trailhead, but I had none of the food that I would need for the 3 days of backpacking ahead of me. I had a rough map that was useless, I came to find, in these high meadows that were bisected and trisected and quadsected by cow paths going off in every direction. I was out of my league. I was already hungry. It was 11 a.m. I already realized that I was going to run out of food before that day was over, and I still had 15 miles left to go. But these men invited me in. They sat me down. They tore from this loaf of bread and passed it to me, and I sat there and I ate, savoring the tangy, tart taste of the farmer's cheese along with the bite of the bread. still soft enough to enjoy, especially when dipped into the juices soaking from the tomatoes. We found as we sat and we ate together, this language barrier between us, my extremely limited Georgian, their lack of English, the broken Russian that was at least passable in being able to understand one another, all of that started to fade. Over time, as we fed ourselves, we found ourselves able to tell stories of our lives, of the village that they come from, the place where they live, of the people around them, the cows that they bring up high into the meadows in springtime in order to feed on the green grass at the top of it. I shared stories of the home that I came from, the life that I lived, how I was enjoying their country, what I thought of Georgian food, which was a perpetual question in people's minds. The answer is always delicious, by the way. And for an hour, 2 hours, we sat there. We talked. We ate. They encouraged me to eat more, clearly seeing that I was struggling and completely unprepared for what I had gotten myself into. Until finally it was time to leave. And said, I really must get going. I have a long way to go. And so the park ranger led me up the paths through the meadow until we made it to the ridge line and could see the line of woods down below, and pointed me along the path that I needed to take to get to where I was going. And as he said goodbye and I hiked off below the tree line, I felt myself full. I felt myself full of the delicious food that they had offered, like grace freely given, unexpected, unanticipated, laid out before me. I had filled my stomach, but I realized more than that my interaction, our conversation, the stories that we told that time together had fed my spirit. Something had been revealed in that encounter and that experience. This connection that crossed culture and language and religion and all of those lines of difference. Until we simply found ourselves sitting there or around this rough-hewn wooden table, enjoying a meal together, savoring one another's company, fed in both body and in spirit. In our gospel reading today, we hear the story of these two disciples who have made their way towards Jerusalem and are some 7 miles off near a village called Emmaus. We hear them trying to process what has happened in their lives. This is 3 days after Jesus, their Messiah, their Savior, their teacher, their friend, the prophet, the one who they had put all of their hope in, had been arrested, had been tortured, had been put to death on the cross, laid in the tomb. The seeming end to all of their hopes, all of their anticipation, all that they thought would happen. And then even more than that, they've heard these weird reports from one of the women who had been a part of their group, from Peter himself, who had gone to the tomb and found the stone rolled away from the grave clothes lying behind, and 2 angels standing there telling them he is not here, he is risen. What did it mean? What did it mean for Jesus? What did it mean for them, the disciples? What did it mean for this movement that he had started? They couldn't make sense of it. And so they're walking along the road, trying to piece it together, to remember all that he had told them, all that he had done, to find something that they could draw on to make sense of it all. Until finally a stranger comes alongside them and says, what is it that you're talking about? And they respond, don't you know? Haven't you heard? Are the only one in Jerusalem who doesn't know? And they walk together, this stranger helping them to make meaning of all that they have seen and experienced, until finally they come into Emmaus. And just as they are about to part ways, just as the stranger is about to go off into the distance, the disciples stop. Something catches them, and they say to him, come, won't you stay with us? And they invite him into the upper room of the house where they're staying. And they sit down at the table together. They lay out the meal. They put the bread in front of him, and they invite him to break it. And so this stranger, this person who they have met along the way, takes the bread. He blesses it with words that would have been so familiar, so known to them. He breaks it, and he gives it to each of them. In that moment that they receive that bread, their eyes are opened. They see that this is no stranger. This is not just someone who they've met along the way. The person who is breaking bread in front of them is Jesus. It is their friend. It is their teacher. It is the one who they have followed, the one who they put all that hope in. It is him. He is risen. He is there with them. Just as soon as they see him, just as soon as the vision appears, he is gone. In an instant, he is no longer with them. But what they are left with are those chunks of bread. The bread torn from that loaf and give it to them. The bread that has been blessed and broken and given to them, they still have that. He is still realized that he may be gone. The vision may have disappeared. His presence with them may be no more in the way that they had once known it, but he is still present. He is there in that bread. He is there in the meal that they share. He is there in the presence of one to another. He is there in and with his disciples. He is not dead. He is risen. I imagine them taking that bread, savoring each and every bite, each and every mouthful of it, feeling it nourishing them, nourishing not only their bodies, but nourishing their spirits with that assurance of God's presence. Savoring each moment of realizing who this Jesus was, what he had come to do, having their eyes open, not just to seeing him before them, but having their eyes open to the whole of Israel's history of salvation, to see him as the culmination of all the scriptures, all that their people had waited for, to recognize that it was him, that he was their Messiah, he was the prophet they believed in, that the way that he came to save them may not look like what they had expected, but it was still there, still with them, that in and through him they had encountered God. That every time they shared that bread, every time they would eat together, every time they would break the bread and give it away, they would be in God's presence, that they would encounter God, that God's love and God's light would fill them, and they would know that Christ was with them, that Christ lived on in each of them, in the midst of each of them, drawing them closer to one another and drawing them ever nearer to the God who they sought. That pattern that was established first at the Last Supper, but we hear repeated in this reading today. The pattern of Jesus taking the bread, blessing it, breaking it, and giving it to his friends. That is the pattern that we remember, that we reenact every single Sunday. Every time we partake in communion, every time we gather at this table, we take the bread, we bless it, we break it, and we give it to one another. It is something that we do as a community. One of the biggest reforms that the Church of England made, and when it broke away from the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century, was to outlaw the practice of priests saying communion on their own. There had been a practice in the Catholic Church of a priest standing there alone, saying communion, maybe for someone who had died, maybe for another occasion or reason. But the reformers held on to this understanding that the breaking of bread was not about one person standing there doing it on their own, but the breaking of the bread was a gift that Christ left to his community, to his friends, to the church, a gift that was meant to be shared together, bread that was broken and given not for the sake of one person, but for all the people. Christ's broken body given for the world. Christ's broken body given so that we all might be made whole. Christ's broken body given so that all might be raised with him in the resurrection. When we hold our hands out to receive the broken bread every Sunday, every time we gather around the table, that is what we are receiving. Christ's body given for us, Christ's broken body offered so that we might be made whole, Christ's broken body given so that we might rise with him, so that we might come into the fullness of life in him, so that we might know that God is with us, God is within us, God is among us, God surrounds us, and God is leading us forward, leading us out into the world to be Christ's body, to share that same bread with others, to nourish the world in and through the love of God. There in the Caucasus Mountains, receiving that bread that was torn and given to me, I recognize the way that bread can be so much more than bread. That bread was a vehicle for connection, for community, for coming together around that shared meal. That something was revealed in and through that bread. The differences between us were erased. We were able to see each other simply as people in need of being fed in body and in spirit. How much more so is the case whenever we gather around this table, whenever we share this bread, whenever we receive the sacrament of Holy Communion, the bread, the body that was given for us. It is more than just bread. It is more than just something that we do in order to remember the things that Jesus said. It is, like those first disciples had, an encounter with God. It is an encounter with the body of the risen Christ, the broken body given for us so that we might be made whole. So today, as we gather around this table once again, may we receive the broken body. May we be reminded of the brokenness that exists within ourselves and the world around us. And as we eat of that bread, as we eat of that body, may we remember Christ's promise that in him all things are being made new. That we all are receivers of that promise, that we are being made whole in and through Christ's presence in our lives and in the world. May we who receive the broken body, who receive that bread torn and offered to us, experience in and through it the promise of new life in God. A new life that shapes our hope, that shapes our faith, that shapes how we act in the world. That we may go out from this place being that bread, being that broken body offered for a world that desperately seeks and needs to be made whole. Amen.